welcome back to Everything Marketplaces, where we talk with marketplace founders and leaders from some of today's top marketplaces. So this is episode 17, and I'm excited to welcome on the one and only Sahil, who's the founder of Gumroad. So Gumroad is a platform that allows creators to sell digital products online, has paid out its creators over 300 million to date. So Sahil, you're quite prolific on Twitter, and you've shared quite a bit about building Gumroad in the open. But let's maybe start off by sharing a little bit more about your background for those that don't know you well, and then how you first started Gumroad.
Yeah, so I grew up in Singapore primarily. I was born in New York to immigrant parents from India, but I grew up primarily in Singapore, and then I moved to the U.S. Back to the U.S. when I was 17 to go to college. I went to USC for one semester, then I dropped out. I joined Pinterest as a second employee at Pinterest, built Pinterest for iPhone, did a bunch of other stuff. And then I had this weekend project idea called Gumroad in April of 2011, I believe, and put that on Hacker News, went viral, raised some money, left Pinterest, raised some money for that. It raised around $1 million seed round from like Max Lefjet and Naval and a bunch of people, the Silicon Valley kind of people. And then raised a Series A from Kleiner Perkins a few months later. And then built the team in 2015. We weren't growing fast enough, tried to raise a Series B, failed to do that, downsized the company. I went remote, moved to Utah, learned to write and paint primarily, sort of went on the 4-hour work week kind of thing for a while. And then kind of just did that. Gumroad kind of just, I wrote a post last year about this whole thing that went kind of viral, I guess, in the startup community. 800,000 people read that. Maybe more now. Haven't checked. And so that was really cool to kind of like share all this stuff and feel like validated for having gone through this kind of crazy journey that I was a little bit wary of disclosing because it was kind of embarrassing, frankly. But I got the distance and everything helped. And then COVID happened and that really accelerated Gumroad again. So now we're kind of like 10 million in revenue, basically no employees, just me and a bunch of contractors. Doubling every year. I have a fund on the side now that I just started this month. And I tweet from 2 accounts, Sahil and Gumroad. And yeah, that's what I've been up to.
Nice. Yeah, thanks for sharing a little bit more. I know most in the group definitely follow along, and that the post that you shared was quite insightful. So maybe in the early days of Gumroad, could you maybe kind of speak to what the team looked like and what your mission was, what the product was that you were setting out to build in the early days?
Yeah, so the product in the early days, so the prototype that I built and launched was basically Bitly with a credit card form, and it's honestly not that different from what Gumroad is today. Obviously, we do a little bit more, but yeah, effectively similar premise. We want to make it really, really easy to sell stuff, the 0 to 1 kind of creator commerce experience. We just want to make that super easy. And then the early team, we mostly just engineers, full stack kind of engineers. We got some cold inbound from people who wanted to do other things for us, like support, sales, things like that. So we brought on a couple of those people as well, but it was primarily product focused. And it was really just like, we built this thing. It's kind of useful for like a very specific use case, which is like, maybe selling ebooks on your website or something like that. And we would just find those people, sell them on it. They would say no because of X. And then we decide if we wanted to build X or not, or they'd say yes, but it would be cool if this was possible. We'd be doing more or whatever if with this feature, et cetera. And we'd decide if that was, and it was just like this very iterative process. And that's honestly not that different from today, which is we just kind of talk to creators. Luckily, we kind of have some scale now, so it's not that hard to like talk to creators and get their feedback. And they're very, it turns out when you're kind of in charge of their living for many folks, they're very willing to give you their feedback on what you can do better, which is amazing for us. Like it is why we can scale with such a small team. I think we could probably get sort of 5x, 10x the company with the sort of like add maybe double the team size or something. Because it's really just building stuff. It's like building stuff, making sure support's happening, make sure payments and all that kind of stuff is running smoothly. But it is a very kind of scalable product, which was my intention from the beginning, was to build something that sort of didn't need a ton of people to make run, which kind of saved the company in 2015 when the layoffs and everything happened. So I think I give myself a little bit of credit for being sort of like prescient on that.
Yeah. As far as, because I know like fast forward to kind of today and speaking to a lot of the creators that, as you mentioned, actually make a living off of Gumroad, which is incredible. What are some of, would you kind of say that like those kind of like power sellers or power users, when do those start to emerge on Gumroad? At what point?
I mean, pretty early. Like Nathan Barry was one of the early ones. Now he runs a company called ConvertKit. But he was, basically it's like bootstrap ConvertKit with his Gumroad earnings, I think, primarily. Yeah, I mean, he was one of the, I mean, when did he start using it? Probably like early, my guess would be like early 2013. So like a year or so into it, we started seeing these people who had sort of started making pretty significant amounts of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars over time. Now we have people who are making millions of dollars over time, which is great. But our focus is still like, I think we actually kind of focus less on the people who are making a living over time, because we realize like the truth is like the vast majority of people won't, and it's kind of supplementary for them, and that's great, and that's sort of very empowering as well. And so we kind of are more broad about it now, where like we just want to help creators make more money in all the different ways that creators can. We just want to enable them and empower them to do that through memberships or product sales or whatever it might be, tipping maybe one day or something like that, services, coaching, who knows. But we're still pretty focused on digital content creators. Yeah, so we started seeing it pretty early, honestly. I think one of the hard challenges was like, it was really hard to replicate, right? Like we saw Nathan Barry kill it and we were like, okay, they're probably like, if we get 1,000 of them, we're done. Like we're good to go. And it just turns out there's actually not that many of those. And that's the sort of fundamental issue with the creator economy, is that it's very sexy right now, especially. But the truth is like, there aren't that many people still that are like making money via products, selling products directly. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to put that stuff together. So a lot of people just end up relying on ads and, sponsorships and influencer marketing kind of stuff. Brand deals, merchandise, that's a little bit easier. But ultimately, I think you make the most money if you sell products directly and make the products yourself directly. It's just a lot of work, so most people don't do it. And it turns out there aren't actually thousands of Nathan Barrys out there. So that took years to learn that. And I think that was one of the reasons that Gumroad wasn't like the unicorn to be.
Got it. Thanks for sharing more on that. So I guess with that said, do you focus on like the first time creators now, or?
Yeah, our focus is almost exclusively on the 0 to 1 creators, getting them from 0 to aha moment sort of stuff, like onboarding, marketing, pricing, basic feature sets, like the fundamental feature sort of set building blocks of Gumroad. And over time, we'll slowly go up market, but I still think there's so much low-hanging fruit on the 0 to 1 moment. So that is sort of our big focus. But I also, the way I think about the other stuff is like, there are users I talk to, and like every creator who makes a significant amount of money basically gets like one feature request, and we'll just build whatever they want. So that lets us kind of like outsource kind of our product development as well. And so we build things that we might not have built internally, but creators often have a better view of what they want more than we do. And the other thing we started doing quite recently is just hiring creators. And literally, like we just added this guy, Daniel Vassallo, who's amazing, is kind of like quarter time head of product. And already he's just been adding tons of value, just like cleaning things up, bringing his, like he makes hundreds of thousands of dollars a year already. And he's used the platform for like 6 months. And so I'm just like, yeah, what would you do? You're effectively running product. What would you do? Like, let me know. I have a fund. I'm going to go do that for a bit. Like, let me know. And so it's only been a few days, I think, probably, or last week. I don't know. But yeah, it's been amazing.
Yeah, I actually saw it on Twitter, which is great because I follow him also. How did that come about? I'm like, what is that kind of like feedback loop like with your creators?
Yeah, so that specifically was, I'm mostly, it's kind of similar to the early stage, mostly hiring engineers. So I tweeted out, we're hiring part-time engineers. As I mentioned, like we only hire part-time people. So just because I wanted to live and breathe the kind of creator stuff. So a lot of our team, they have other things they want to do and things like that. But yeah, so I tweeted out like, we're hiring engineers. And then at the bottom of the Notion doc, I said, by the way, we might later in the future hire these other positions to kind of like hint, right? To kind of just say, for the people who are really invested in Gumroad are going to read all this stuff, like I've learned over time that like putting out sort of like Easter eggs and things is like just fun and like rewards people who are like bought in a little bit more. Um, and so I just kind of, kind of said there, got like maybe a few emails, maybe like 4 or 5, I don't know, something like that, emails about it, from people who are like, like basically like, saying, hey, kind of like the way I like to think about it is like a preemptive right? Like a preemptive round of financing. Like you want people to kind of lean in, ideally. That's those are the best fundraisers, et cetera. So similar thing. I just kind of put it out there. He said, hey, I saw this, like, let me pitch you on this idea, And so basically he pitched me what was already in my head, which is the best, which is like, I'd love to do this quarter time. I have all these other projects similar to you, but like, 10 hours a week or so, we can see how that goes. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And so, it was really easy. I already knew who he was. Obviously, he's incredibly familiar with Gumroad. If I literally just said, the only goal you have is to make Gumroad better for your use case specifically as a creator, he would kill it, right? And so I'm just kind of leaning into that, and I luckily there's this viral loop that kind of happens because Twitter has become such a big channel for me and him and Gumroad as a whole, even though it's probably still to this day not the number one, sort of contrary to maybe what some people might believe. But it just like doing these experiments like leads to people joining the company, and then we talk about it, and then it grows the company, more people want to join the company, and it's just like this really nice flywheel. Obviously it took 9 years to build, but basically I do know, I've never paid for a job posting. I don't do any of that. I don't do any ads. It's all pure scale. And that's what I'm really going after. That's been the focus of my life right now, has just been hyper scale. Like how much can I scale myself? Can I get to 100 million ARR with no employees? Yeah, probably. Think so. That's the beauty of software. So it's kind of like just having fun with it and seeing how far I can kind of push it.
Awesome. So I would say are you the primary, obviously like as the founder, I feel like, a lot of people directly associate your identity with Gumroad and probably, vice versa. So do you have others on the team that maybe, they're kind of tossing out those Easter eggs or putting those out there like you mentioned, where they're kind of helping with the hiring process, or are there ways that they're directly interacting with the community and kind of helping with these initiatives, or is it primarily you, do you feel like?
On Twitter, it's primarily me. We have a few folks, and now obviously Daniel's probably going to do a lot more of that. But yeah, we have a lot, we have like a big email list. It's 110 plus thousand people. Like our email list is way more valuable than anything on Twitter. So like, yeah, we have the email list, we have YouTube, we have these Zoom webinars we do, we have the Facebook group with thousands of creators in it. So we have a ton of different ways that our sort of the team and our customers kind of like interact with each other. And then, obviously a lot of our team are creators. So they're all sort of intimately familiar with Gumroad and each of their, creators aren't like a monolith, right? So there's all these different communities within the sort of creator kind of economy, right? There's like animation and art, there's like writing, there's like the info product kind of stuff that Nathan Barry does, there's like the email newsletter kind of stuff. So there's so many, there's all the technical stuff, like the Adam Wathan kind of stuff. And I don't even need, like, I feel like I don't even need to pursue it. Like my day-to-day is filled with talking to creators anyways now, because they're awesome people. So yeah, it's just honestly it's become super organic that we don't have a process or anything and sort of encourage it. It just kind of happens. Yeah.
Nice. And do you still talk on a day-to-day with creators? I actually remember, I think it was a mention you were saying like thousands of coffee meetings a few years ago, obviously when like in-meeting persons were, a thing. But like, how often do you still talk with creators?
Yeah, every day, not in the same order. Those thousands were just sort of mostly aspiring founders that I was trying to help out in the early days. But yeah, back when Gumroad was like a unicorn to be kind of thing, and everyone wanted to hang out and stuff. So weirdly, that's kind of happened again in a different way. But yeah, I think I don't know. I probably have maybe like one a day, two a day, maybe something like that. And then, I have I don't like meetings that much. So I have a ton of asynchronous conversations with creators, right? So I don't know, like if you go through my DM, I don't know, Twitter doesn't tell me, but probably hundreds of messages a day with all across everything, WhatsApp and like I'm very accessible. Like everyone does know basically who the CEO of the company is. So any creator who uses the product or doesn't use the product can ping me and say, hey, this is broken, or have you thought about this, or what do you think about this? Or, my email is pretty public. Um, Facebook group I'm on there too. So like, before the fund complicated things a little bit more than I was expecting. But before the fund, it was like basically I would only do two things, which was like talk to customers and build stuff. Um, that was all I would do. I wasn't recruiting, I wasn't managing the team. It was all kind of already asynchronous and scaled. It was just like talking to customers and then building stuff and fixing bugs and just like basically being an individual contributor. And then, every so often tweeting. Tweeting is like free, right? It's not that much work to tweet. I don't spend that much time on Twitter relative to like all the other things that I do. It might seem like it because I tweet, I tweet significantly amount, but like, I would say I don't use Twitter that much.
Oh, cool. And on the community side, because this is definitely something I think a lot of people in the group are interested in. I know you did the creator dinner series a while back. Was that what you called the Gumroadians? But or is that
the Gumroads is something else.
Okay, got it. Yeah. So on the dinner, so I guess we'll maybe speak about the dinner events that you were doing. What was the kind of the origination of that, and maybe some of the learnings from that?
Yeah, I mean, similar to a lot of the other, you might sense a theme, but like basically a friend of mine was like, have you ever thought about doing dinners? This is when I was living in Utah at the time. And I said, no, like, that's like, why would I want to be in a room with like a bunch of creators who are like intimately familiar with everything that's wrong with my product? And he was like, yeah, but like, what if we just did everything for you? Like, we'll do it for free. And like, we'll just get, your top Utah creators, like the top 25 people, collectively made over 10 million bucks probably by now. And like, let's just, just hang out. And like Gumroad is profitable at this point. So it was like, yeah, we have money. Like, sure, we'll try it out, see what happens. And it was really fun. It was just really cool to get everyone in a room and like just hang out for like 2, 3, 4 hours, one Tuesday night or whatever it was, Wednesday night, I think. And then it worked out. And then we just did a bunch more. I had the time at this point, like this is around a year ago. So I had tons of free time. And so I was like, yeah, let's, I'm happy to like go explore the country and like go do dinners in like every major city. So we did, I don't know how many we ended up doing, maybe like 13 or something in like every major city in the US above a certain Gumroad kind of income sort of, whatever, some math on that. But then we did a couple, and like we did one in Vancouver, and we wanted to do more. I think Vancouver might have been the last one, and then COVID obviously kind of has prevented that from going forward, but we would like to do whenever that returns. They're going to be, Gumroad has like doubled since we did them, so they're going to be cooler and better, and definitely something I'd like to do again. Nice. And then in terms of your learnings, I mean, really, it's hard to describe, but it's just small things, right? Just talking to people and getting a sense of like who these people are. It just like makes your mental model stronger on what you should build, who you're really building for. Like when you can imagine that. And also like when I meet all these people, like when I design stuff or build stuff, like it's so easy to just share it with them and be like, hey, what do you think of this? And they're all, super responsive. I have all their numbers, vice versa. So it's just like, it basically gives me a group of like literally hundreds of people that I can basically ping, and they'll get back to me basically immediately, and they would probably do that anyway, but like having, putting face to name and having a sort of a more intimate relationship with them has like really been awesome. And also just like gives me energy. Like the fact that, I forget that like $300 million going to creators, like that's a lot of millions of dollars. And I don't really think about that on a daily basis. I don't even really think about any impact, really. I'm just focused on whatever the day-to-day stuff is, which I think is good. Like, I don't think you should obsess over like impact and numbers and stuff like that. But I think, yeah, every once in a while, it's kind of nice when people come up to you and be like, yeah, this house that I own, like I own because of this thing that you built, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's got to be an incredible feeling. So.
Yeah, it wears off after a while, but it was cool the first couple of times. It's weird how everything, that is one thing I've learned is like nothing matters. Just have fun. It's all moot at the end of the day. Enjoy your life.
So on the Gumroadians, because I mean it just sounds cool first off, but yeah, could we maybe speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Gumroadians initially was the name that we referred to all of our employees as was Gumroadians. And so I just thought it was funny. It's like Martian kind of Gumroadian Martian kind of theme. I like sci-fi and stuff. And I don't think I came up with it. I think someone else came up with it. And then so I just have used it for things. And then we had this idea for an animated TV show. And I was like, how do I, because I was like getting into painting and writing science fiction. I was like, how do I like merge all of my interests together? So I came up with this idea for a science fiction kind of sort of like kids TV show, basically. Kids TV show, like kind of a little bit upscaled, but and then yeah, just moved to LA and started meeting with people and like put together this deck and like unfortunately COVID kind of swept and I got busy with other things. I still want to do it someday, but it's on pause right now. We're doing these bumpers with one of the heads of animation for Spider-Verse and an art director at DreamWorks, like some Gumroad creators actually. We're going to do these ads instead and brand them under the Gumroadians thing. But it was just like the way I thought about it was like, you know, there's like sort of like the very abstract like future that Gumroad wants to have exist. Like if Gumroad was a person, like what future would they want? And the future they want would probably like a bunch of people creating stuff all the time, right? This kind of like very post-scarcity sci-fi utopia kind of thing. And so I thought it would just be fun to like, let's like try to describe it and like visualize it. And we have all these creators, you know, on our platforms. Like let's just like give them money and they can do this incredibly broad brief. Like let's just see what they do with it. And so we just, you know, I just give some people small checks here and there to do some cool art, and then we post it on the Gumroad social feeds, and it's just fun. And hopefully one day we'll do a TV show and it'll be really cool and funny, but we'll see. It might be a few years before that happens. There's no rush. We have time.
We'll keep an eye out for it.
Mm-hmm.
So
the art is really cool though. If you can find some of the art, it's pretty dope.
yeah, we actually have quite a few artists in the group. One who will come on a little bit, Andy. He's a Lego artist, so
Oh, that's cool.
need to get him on there. But so I did have a question because one of the you mentioned it in one of your open board meetings was the discovery and helping promote, or maybe promote's not the best word, but helping drive a little bit of demand for some of the creators. So how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, so Gumroad first really started out as a tool like Shopify or something, right? Where we don't promise any discovery distribution. We just promise good software to help you sell your products directly to an audience you already have. And then around actually part of the sort of Series B, how do we make this thing grow faster so we can raise more money? We decided to ship this marketplace. It was very kind of like almost antagonistic to our antithesis to, I guess, our other values as a company. But we thought, you know, at the end of the day, we want to live. That's priority one. So we built this prototype and it did okay. Had some interesting inklings, and then yeah, over time we just sort of just continued to build it out and make it better. And you know, we charge a small fee for anything we distribute, so we're starting to kind of incentivize a little bit to kind of like do more on that end. And I do want to have like a tiny team within the company like dedicated to discover over time. But again, like that needs to happen organically because I'm not the one to do any of that, and I think it will. But yeah, it's sort of the way that we think about it is it's just lift. So like anyone that sells products directly to the audience, like we can provide some lift to that experience and like get them, you know, if you make $100,000, we can help you make 105 or 110 or $115,000. We're not going to make someone go from 0 to 1 on that. Like marketplaces don't really do that for anybody. You know, that's kind of a different model. In marketplaces, basically the rich get richer. That's pretty typical. Which is why we kind of delayed it for so long. But I do think pitching it like, you know, a lift mechanism for folks who are already investing in the platform and are getting some organic growth out of it. I think it does sort of make sense and it is a good part of the pitch. A lot of people getting onto the platform, they are excited about that. And I think if we can get to, you know, 10% of the volume that we're driving through Gumroad, which would be like 1.2 million bucks a month, which would give us an extra, you know, 120,000 in pure profit, basically. Like that's a large incentive for us to kind of drive that forward. So I think it will kind of have its own flywheel over time, and we'll see where it goes. I don't think we'll ever be like Etsy level where it really becomes about the marketplace first. But who knows, right? It's hard to predict where things go.
Yeah, that was actually going to be one of my questions, is where you see it going, but
I think I'm more interested in Gumroad becoming like a social network over time, where like there's a feed of people you subscribe to, and like there's kind of like almost like Twitter, but just for creators or something like that. But I don't know. Like, well, it is very iterative. Like, I'm not like a big thinker. Like, what's the future? I think I predicted some things pretty well around the creator economy and stuff in the early days, but beyond that, who knows? So it is just like build a good team, react quickly, embrace the newest technology, and I think we'll do okay. We've far surpassed like any expectations I had for where Gumroad was going to go when I wrote that failure post. So every sort of from then on, it's all been like fun. Like, yeah, like it's just cool to see what people are doing with it, and it's like fun to ship. But it's also like I'm not gonna raise 50 million bucks and like try to take another stab at this thing. Like, it is what it is.
Yeah, nice, cool. So we're going to open up for questions here in a little bit. I did have a question that people had asked in the group, though, for me to ask in the chat, which was if you have any, like, typically marketplaces like graduation problems. Do you kind of face that with Gumroad?
What kind of problem? Graduation
like a graduation
problem? Yeah, I think everyone does. Ultimately, you are always going to get squeezed from both sides. You have people who have other options at the beginning, and then you have tools that are constantly making it easier and easier and easier to build your own business from scratch. So it's always going to get more appealing to just leave and build your own stuff. And that's, everyone who makes over $1 million a year will leave Substack. Like, no one should be using Substack if they're making that much money. And that's just, part of, you just have to figure out where you are in the kind of life cycle of a creator, and maybe move a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right over time. Kickstarter is like very clear, like this part of the process, for example. And they could do more, and they've decided for whatever reason not to. They could do more Patreon-y stuff, right, or whatever. So yeah, I think you just have to kind of figure that out. But yeah, there's totally a graduation problem. We're comfortable with it. The exciting thing about it is that I really believe if we're so focused, we are pretty well known in the sort of 0 to 1 use case, that I think as we build some of these things, we'll be able to scale up quite easily, because people just will, instead of leaving at whatever they would have left at, they're now waiting, until they're double the volume to leave or whatever, So I think we'll kind of recapture some of these people as well as we support more of these features, but we're going to do that very slowly. And like, we're going to do it by just building the best product and just hoping word of mouth spreads enough. And people are like, oh yeah, Gumroad does this now. Like, let's all go back. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Which I think is starting to happen.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for sharing more on that. Cool. So our chat's just blowing up over here. So Andy, you want to come on and ask your question?
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Mike. So yeah, I feel like, Sahil, you've really kind of like established yourself as like this very no bullshit brand in a cool way at this point. And one of the things I think you do that's really neat is share traction, financial data, all that stuff very publicly. And that's kind of a growing trend around many companies, but I think it's really neat the way you do it. And I was kind of wondering, like, my company is very early in its life cycle. I think it wouldn't make sense for us to do that at this stage. It wouldn't make sense because we would appear, not formidable at all to other competitors, because people probably honestly just don't care at this point. I'm curious, do you feel like there's a right stage for companies to start doing that, for people to do that? And do you feel like there's some companies where they just shouldn't do that, maybe specific types of startups?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, the reason we did it was like Gumroad was a write-off basically. And so I was like, oh, we might as well share. It was actually flat when I started sharing the numbers. Like, obviously it's kind of gone like this a little bit, which is nice. But certainly, like, my goal was to share it when it was like the least interesting, because it was like the lowest stakes for me and I could always stop and no one would notice. Now it's interesting because it's actually like the stakes are a lot higher potentially. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's a certain type of company that should or should not do it. I really just did it because I thought it would be useful to founders. Like, I didn't expect for it to come back to the business. I think There is probably some of that. Like there is probably some utility to it now. I think it takes time to see that happen, but I think part of the growth recently has been sort of just being super open and transparent about the whole thing. Um, but yeah, for me, it was just like, what do I want? And I'm like, if there's no reason not to share, I'm going to share. And, I tried it out. I was like, worst case, I just never do it again. And then, I don't know. I seemed like, oh, it's like, yeah, I'll do it again and I'll do it again and I'll do it again. And then I think people did sort of seem to like that. Um, and yeah, I mean, I would say I wouldn't have done it if we were like hiring aggressively. If there was like a zero sum game we were playing, right? Like we're hiring same talent pool, we're trying to raise money from the same VCs, like we're kind of trying to. There's a lot of competition, et cetera. Like maybe it doesn't make sense, but Gumroad is sort of so mature and like at this point, like it's probably not going to go away. That I was like, yeah, we'll see. Doesn't hurt. And frankly, like I like the idea that our competitors and stuff are all thinking about me and I don't think about them. So that's sort of the strategic element there is like, I think it makes Gumroad more appealing and our competitors less appealing to recruit it, people who are being recruited for these companies and things like that. Like I just want Gumroad to be so awesome. And we can't win on volume. Like we're not going to be the unicorns. Like what else, how can we win? Like what else can we do to be interesting for people? And I think we, obviously definitely get some more shots taken at me and things like that, just for being more open online, just a part of the nature of it. But I do think net, it's not even like net better. It's just net like what I want to do. Like I don't consider myself a no bullshit person. I would never like say that. And people say it like all the time. And I'm like, I don't know. That's just who I am. Like, I don't think of myself as a risk taker at all. I would never consider myself a risk taker. I look at risks and I decide, and like, just like everybody else does. But then, yeah, I think objectively you look back and you're like, well, these things you did that other people wouldn't do. But like when it's like, you're at 0-0, so like everything is relative to you. So I just think of other people as like not risky versus me as risky or something like that. I think of other people as bullshitters. Like I don't think of myself as no bullshit, if that makes sense.
Of course.
But yeah, it's just like, I think part of it is just like embracing who you are. And like, when it works, like it really works because it's just like it's like what I was talking about before. It's like this infinite flywheel where like I don't have to do anything. I don't have schedules. I don't have meetings. I just like do whatever I want to do. And I talk about doing it and like, it seems to work. So it, like I can do more of that and I don't have to do any of the other stuff that slows everybody else down. So I can do more of the stuff that works. And like, a year in, I've done 100 things that work and they've done 2 or something like that. So it is finding like whatever it is for your business, it might not be the same things, but it's like finding out how do you really get to a place where like, like we have no growth channel and we're doubling every year. Like, how do you get there? I don't know. We just built a really great product and like talked about it a lot. But it is, I think, possible for many businesses to figure out what that true like viral loop is.
Super interesting.
I don't know if that was helpful, but that's kind of how I think about it.
Very cool.
Hey, Derek, did you want to come on? See, maybe he's muted.
Hey, Sahil, I was muted, sorry. Quick question. What was the biggest barrier to entry for creators selling on Gumroad in the early days, and how has that changed, I guess, over time?
I mean, the biggest barrier is just like laziness and stress, like it's probably been the same since the beginning, which is like, it's hard to get people to do something they're not already doing. Like people have this like tremendous inertia in their life. This is like something I look when I do like investing stuff, like this is probably the number one thing, which is like, why would anyone use this? And not even like, is this better than what's out there? But just in general, people are very comfortable with like Diet Coke. They're not going to like try your new brand for no reason. Like you have to give them like a million reasons before they're going to try it. And so it's just that, it's just like, you have to be so good that people are like, fine, I'll go use this other platform. Either you have to be so good or the need has to be so great for people, for them to really kind of, it has to be almost existential for them. And yeah, it was just, and it was just that. It wasn't like a feature that we didn't build or something like that. It really was just like finding the people. There just weren't enough of them, frankly, to really build a big business. even today, I would argue it's still, the creator economy is still very, very, very small.
Right. I'd assume it's different because you're dealing with individuals rather than businesses who are motivated.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. Yeah, the creator economy is like, it's like the LTV of consumer with the scale of B2B. So it's like it's a tough worst of both worlds sort of equation. But yeah, there's no like obvious sort of like big barrier that we were able to overcome. And the other thing is just like over time, like brand, like now people are familiar with Gumroad, and like most people I think would be like, yeah, Gumroad is good for these sorts of things, and people don't really think twice about it. But in the early days when you're super young and you might disappear tomorrow, like, there's always that question of like, why should I use this startup versus these 15 other startups, right?
Right.
I was even looking at like the Stripe, like an old version of the Stripe homepage from 2013 or something. This is like 2 years after Gumroad launched, and like half the companies didn't even exist anymore. So it's like, you never know. It's easy to look back and be like, oh, all these companies worked, but like so many didn't.
Awesome. Hey, Paris, did you want to come on?
Sure. So when you were opening up the Discover page and kind of like the marketplace for digital content, what were the kind of like breadcrumbs that led up to that point? Did you just decide one day like, hey, this might be a plus for the creators, or were they consistently asking for that kind of marketplace to exist?
Yeah, creators would ask for it. Like it was one of the top features. I think kind of misplaced, because I think the people who tend to ask for that want money. But like they would just want to like do nothing and have more money come in, right? So they're like, hey, it would be awesome if you had a marketplace. And it's like, well, yeah, but like having a marketplace is very different from like having an active marketplace. Like we could build these things. No one's going to buy your stuff. So I think, you got to be a little bit careful with like that kind of feedback, because you want to make sure, like typically we don't really listen to people who've made no money on the platform. That's typically a bad sign. We like listening to people who've made like $10,000 on the platform, and they're like, if you had these features, we'd make 20,000 or something, right? So it really just was us deciding to do it eventually. And we did it very slowly. Like we basically built recommendations, no marketplace, just recommendations based on what you bought. We'd email you and say these 3 other things you might be interested in. And then we started just like putting that in different places, like the post receipt page, the file download page. We're still early. Like we still haven't done much, honestly. Like we could do a lot more, and we will. We added like a search bar to certain pages, things like that, to just kind of hint at it. Because for me, the way I think about it is like building a marketplace is like a multi-year effort. Like especially switching to being a marketplace over time, like having that functionality when you first didn't. And so, we wanted to start early and like build, sort of just like make sure people knew, oh, yeah, Gumroad is going in this direction with the search bar and things like that. And so probably next year is when we'll get more serious about it and build like a more full featured marketplace and go more kind of like Skillshare, kind of like masterclass or something like that, but still bottoms up from the creators. Creative market, I guess, might be a better comp. But yeah, it's really like linking the username to the page, like just constantly small things. Like the way we think about it is like there's already a marketplace. It's just the sales pages, and everything else doesn't exist right now. And so it's just like building in the holes, right? Like the creator profile with all the products, we have that now. So like maybe the next thing might be like people you follow, and like you can see that, and just exposing the data that we already have. And that's the nice thing about it, is like we already have all this data, right? Like we already have $10-15 million a month going through the platform. So it shouldn't be too hard, I think, to bootstrap the marketplace, right? Like because we really started as a single player tool, we never had the sort of chicken and egg problem of building a marketplace that marketplaces typically have to worry about if they're building it the more kind of traditional way.
Yeah, and you have the advantage of digital content. You're not restricted by location as well, and that kind of thing. Thank you.
Totally. Yeah, totally. Getting to liquidity is much easier when there's like, cross-border and everything like that.
Hey, I actually had a question for you. I've had I would say some challenges scaling up payments with some of the potential kind of fraud issues. I mean, have you guys had challenges with that in the past? And if so, What were some of the, kind of ways that you overcame that from, whether product side, ops side, or whatnot?
Yeah. So yeah, that was one of the reasons I wanted Max Levchin as an investor. So we brought him on board in our seed round, and like that was like the first thing I sat down with him for was like, hey, this is going to be a problem, I assume. So like how, like basically just tell me what you want, what we should do. And it was like honestly pretty simple, which is like you just build a risk model. You just have like now Stripe Radar exists and there's other tools and stuff. Civ Science is a thing too, worth checking out potentially. But basically, you just have all this data, you collect it, you try to collect as much of it as you can, like keyboard strokes and mouse movements and whatever you can. And then you feed that all into an ML model. And then you have a dashboard where you make it really easy for your team to review all these accounts. So that, I would say that it was never a problem. It never got too crazy, but yeah, you really want to keep your chargeback rate below, our chargeback rate right now is pretty low. It's probably 0.2, 0.3% or something like that. It's probably been like that for years. We have someone who does it part-time, just making sure everyone gets reviewed. And yeah, but it is work. I mean, and it is one of those reasons that like maybe raising money was a good idea. It's like building that out required hiring a data scientist, hired, an engineer, potentially someone to build the whole dashboard and everything. Like it's not trivial, right? It's not trivial at all. I would love to open source it because I think other startups could benefit from it. Unfortunately, you can't really open source something like that because then the hackers would, the fraudsters would see what you're doing. So it has been a little bit of a challenge. But yeah, we have this internal product called Iffy that sort of manages all of that for us. And then the website basically just sends data to it. Two points. One is pre-purchase, like as part of that flow. And then sort of second post-purchase, which is like after the fact to make sure everything looks good and stuff. And then there's all sorts of different types of fraud. There's seller fraud, buyer fraud, seller fraud, et cetera. Like there's different kinds of, there's card testing, there's money laundering, there's, terrorists using your product that you have to be mindful of. If you're accepting payments on the internet, like you will be targeted by fraudsters. Yeah, that's part of the game.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for sharing more on that. Is out of curiosity, is that why you guys also stay out of services, or? That's
one reason. Yeah. I mean, well, the big reason is just focus. Like we could probably support services, but it's just like, there's a lot of functionality we'd have to build. And like, I don't like doing things unless we're really good at them. So we're launching like a Patreon competitor. That's going to be our focus. And then, we'll see, but definitely services is on the roadmap for next year sometime, probably.
Awesome. Cool. Let's see. Hey, Jack, did you want to come on?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, how's it going? Nice to meet you. I was just curious, like knowing what you know now, obviously you're a VC yourself, but curious if you had any advice for marketplaces on when you think they should go more of the, the bootstrap model versus like the hyper growth, VC path, given everything you know now, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't have a ton of context on marketplaces specifically, but my generalized take is always like, if you want to build something that you need money to build, you should raise money.
Right.
Basically. I think Gumroad, we did need to raise money to build what we needed to build. We didn't need $8 million in 6 months or something, but we did need a significant amount of capital. I think like $1 million, $2 million, something like that to build it out. Now it's a very different landscape, remote work and all these kind of things are happening. So it's not as necessary probably. But yeah, that's sort of the same calculus, right? Which is like, where do we want to be in a year? Do we need more people to build the stuff that we need to get there, to get there. So yeah, it really comes down to that. I think the nice thing with marketplaces is that they're pretty like metrics driven. So like, it's really easy to know, like, should you raise money or not, at least on the Series A and Series B, et cetera level. $1 million in annualized recurring revenue and things like that are sort of, there's milestones like 5 million, I think, for Series B, et cetera. Like you want to be growing at a certain rate, at least tripling every year at the sort of early stages. And so and it's easy to know who to talk to, right? Because people who do marketplaces, like Sarah Tavel is a good friend of mine. Like she's like, basically every single marketplace company I invest in, I'm going to be like, I'll talk to her and be like, hey, invest in this company. Obviously, I'd love for you to give them a term sheet, and whenever they're ready, like, what would you want from them, et cetera. And so just like building just knowing, because that's just the thing I wish I knew earlier was like, what would I need to raise a Series B? And like, if I knew I wasn't there, I probably would have like changed courses potentially sooner,
Cool. Thanks for that. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
Awesome. All right, Levi, do you want to come on?
Absolutely. Hey, Sahil. Levi here. So I wanted to start off by actually saying that one of my favorite Gumroad creators is Shay Serrano. So, a staff writer of The Ringer and such. So wanted to throw that out there. Yeah. The question I had for you was like, you've now had the opportunity to live in different sort of, I guess what you could call startup regions, right? So the Bay Area, Provis, Utah, Los Angeles, and most recently Portland. And I'd be curious as to whether those regions have also impacted just Gumroad in general, and kind of like your view on, where, startups can be, both started and continue to grow, given sort of the different sort of tiered regions that you've been in.
Yeah, I mean, like pre-COVID, I would have definitely said, like, if I was starting a company, I would move back to San Francisco, like no doubt in my mind. And frankly, even today, I would still probably do that. But that's, changing quite quickly. The reason I say San Francisco is still quite important is, it's sort of like, you don't know how valuable it is, but you do know how much it costs to move there. So like, you're sort of, if you're not willing to move there, like you should have a really good reason not to, because like, you don't know what the upside could be. That's kind of how I think about it, is like, if I really want my business to work, I'm going to, really optimize for that single variable. And that it typically means moving to San Francisco. But yeah, I think that's changing and will continue to change. Like, it's certainly less important than it was previously, and it continues to become less important. And I hope that over time it is not that important, so I can move back and it'll be cheap. That'll be wonderful. I mean, in terms of like how each place sort of makes me rethink Gumroad, or like gives me a different perspective. Honestly, like the big thing is like how, I don't know, creators seem to be quite similar in a lot of these places. But the consistency is the fact that they don't care that much about Gumroad. Like they really have their life. They care about certain things. And in general, like when I ask creators, do you want this or do you want more money? Like every time they're like, more money. Yeah, that'd be great. And so it just keeps us humble about, like, no one really gives a shit about Gumroad, right? Like we help people do their job and like, we solve a problem for them and it's awesome. But like, we don't need to get caught up in how cool we are and like how much money we've made. Like at the end of the day, like I really believe nothing really matters super strongly. It's kind of how I look at the venture firm too. It's like, I want to give founders money so they can go build stuff and I'm happy to help, but no one really cares about me. And like, that's fun. That's actually great. And no VCs care about me and I don't care about any VCs. Like we all just want to like make some money and like have a good life and learn some stuff and meet cool people. And we're all transactional in nature, pretty transactional in nature, especially the men, I think. Yeah, that's kind of how I think about it. I know it's a little bit morose potentially, but I think my advice, like, I think the way to take that as a new founder or what have you would be just to like understand that no one gives a shit about you. And ultimately people are going to give you money if you're executing and they think you're going to be able to 10x that or 100x it or 1000x it or whatever. Right. And same thing with users and customers. Like they're typically going to use the thing that's going to solve their problem the best. And other things matter, right? Like brand, obviously this matters, but like not nearly as much as like just solving the problem and getting out of the way. I think that is still sort of like super fundamental. If almost every creator, if you said, hey, if you left Gumroad, you'd have to use this terrible piece of software, but you're going to make 50% more, I would probably say everyone would switch, right? Like most people would probably consider that. And that's fine. That's what they should do. And so I think just being honest about it has been really nice for me to realize, oh yeah, Gumroad is just a piece. Yeah, their houses exist because of Gumroad, but if Gumroad didn't exist, they would have figured it out, right? Like they would have done something else. I don't deserve credit for like babies that now exist because like two people met because someone moved to San Francisco or what, and like, or whatever, right? Like it's hard to say who deserves blame and credit in this like singular system that we live in. anyways, I got onto some weird tangent there, but hopefully that answered your question a little bit.
I do actually selfishly have a quick follow up on that, and it's probably a little bit more geared on fundraising. So I listened to a podcast recently, that had you, of course, in it, and one of the things you talk about is that for startups that are looking to fundraise, really there's much more value that you can get by fundraising directly from a fellow founder, an operator, right? Like someone that can provide much more sort of expertise, especially in the early days, rather than like a traditional VC that really is just more of a capital insertion, right? And so would love if you could just expand a little bit on that as well.
Yeah, I mean the core like pitch, I guess, for me is I always just tell founders like if you take money from a founder or someone who's been a founder, like they're just gonna know more about what you've been through than someone who hasn't been through that, right? And it's hard to say, oh, I can help with this or I can help with that or whatever. But like in general, like there are all these like many lessons that I have, like thousands of little things that I've learned over time that I can share that if you haven't gone through it, you probably just don't know them. You can't really read them in a book because you read them and you forget them. Your body doesn't like remember them because it doesn't need to, because it doesn't hurt enough. And so, yeah, I just think if you are, if I had a group of people that were founders and a group of people that weren't founders, I'd probably pick from the former group, and also just build relationships with people, right? Because you don't know who's going to help and on what. It's like a very holistic, like I can be helpful kind of thing, which is why it's kind of that term has become so popular. But the way I think about it is like, I just want to build relationships with people and have high touch points with people and just be really responsive. Even though I have a company and I have a fund, like almost anyone I bet that has worked with me before would probably say that they're surprised at how responsive I happen to be. Like if you DM me and stuff, like I'm very responsive. I'm either responsive or I don't reply at all, to me, one of those two. And that's how I stay responsive. And that's just a core tenet of my philosophy. And I think it's why founders hopefully want to work with me. And like, it means that like, if they have a question, they're going to get to the person they can get an answer from in an hour versus the answer, in a week. And so and I think it makes my life easy because I don't have to pitch myself as like all of these things that I can help founders with. So yeah, I think in general, if you're a founder CEO, my guess is like every founder CEO is going to want to take your money over virtually anybody else. And so far I've seen that to be true. And so we'll see. I think that's a little bit of why VCs don't really like what I say on Twitter all the time, is because they don't like the fact that I'm highlighting the fact that they like, I beat them on the most important thing, and they might beat me on everything else, like fund construction and this and that. But guess what? Doesn't matter. None of those things matter if you don't have this other thing. And so it's kind of existential for them, which is fine, but that's also, classic disruption. So I don't mind it.
Cool. So we're just about out of time, but I do want to, Doc, you had a good question, I think, because there's quite a few people in no code. Did you want to come on and ask really quick?
Yeah, sure. Just real quick, I wanted to ask, because you were a judge, well, I believe I saw your name that you're going to be a judge for MakerPad for the challenge later this month. I was thinking about what projects or concepts are you excited to see being solved with no code in the creator space or even in the world, either one?
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in a lot of stuff around no code. Like, I think I was reading this really interesting piece by Alan Kay about how there's no job today called the scribe, right? Because everyone can write today. You don't really consider that like a job, really. I mean, they're writers, but typically you're writing as a function of something else. And virtually everyone learns how to write at a pretty early age. And it changes things. Like if you can, if you don't need a scribe in your society, like a group of people who can do a certain skill, that leads to a certain level of thinking, like, it's just better, more opportunity for everybody, like leads to a lot of innovation, democracy, whatever. So I think we're there with like software still, where we have scribes, we have like software developers, right? With like a group of people who can like build stuff and no one else can really do that. And not only can they build stuff, but like I think in logic, like I think in code, like when I think about doing deals and like mental models for making a decision and like how to scale my brand or run Gumroad, like I'm thinking in code because there are a lot of like concepts that I've learned via learning how to code. And so I'm just interested in like if no code and low code can like teach people how to think in this computational way, because I just think it's really important to learn these concepts, data structures, and algorithms typically. And I just think like I wouldn't. People ask me all the time, like around no code, like, would you recommend no code? Would you recommend learning code? I always say 100%. I'm an investor in MakerPad, and I still say like everyone should learn how to code. Why? Because I would be lying if like I'm only talking to you because I learned how to code. Like my whole life is, my career exists because I learned how to code. I'm going to be a successful VC because I know how to code. Like I can run Gumroad with one person at $10 million in revenue a year, doubling because I know how to code. So I'm always a little bit like, I don't like when people use no code as an excuse not to learn how to code. Like I think they're sort of mutually exclusive ideas and they should be both tackled. You should learn no code and learn how to code. But yeah, I don't know. I think Causal is a really interesting project to kind of help with the computational kind of like make people think more statistically and probabilistically instead of deterministically. And I'm sort of interested in more of those and like different things that basically only certain groups of people could do, and with certain skills that maybe took years to learn how to do. Now more people can do them, like 10x more people, 100x more people, 1000x more people. I do believe, like I had a tweet that either a creator or a robot is going to take your job, which I really believe. Like I think in 50 years or 100 years, like there's going to be highly multi-hyphenated people, and then there's going to be robots, and everything's automated besides that. And like all of the sort of like vertical specific jobs that we have today, like don't make sense to me. Like that will all be, there will be chefs and robots. There won't be cooks, if that makes sense. Like the middle is gonna wash out. And hopefully that means like not high unemployment. Hopefully we figured that out through other ways. But I think that is kind of where the future goes, and it has been going for a long time. I think you could probably there's no farmers. There's robots and like owners of farms or whatever, right? Like there has become much more of a stratification. So I think that will continue to happen. That's my prediction. My prediction for everything is like very boring, which is just like what's happened before is going to happen again. It's just more of it, right? The creator economy is not new. It's not like this new thing because of COVID. Like it's happened with Gumroad in 2011 and WordPress before that and Dreamweaver before that or whatever, right? Like it's an ongoing thing. CDs, we don't have to ship CDs anymore. That was like a thing startups had to do not that long ago even, right? Like probably less than 20 years ago. So yeah, it's just like an ongoing trend, and we're just there. We're just still on that J curve, heading up to the moon or whatever.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate that.
Awesome. Well, this is really great. So thanks for taking the time to join us. Is there any, last bit of insights that you wanted to leave us with, or?
Someone asked what my typical day looks like, which is kind of almost oxymoronic for me. Like I don't have a typical day. It's all push. Like I don't do anything. If there's nothing to do, I don't do anything. So people just fill my time with stuff, like, and I just, have few meetings. Right now I have too many meetings, but like around a month ago, I had 0 meetings. I write in the mornings and then I do deep work on Gumroad typically. And then I have like some meetings because of the fund and stuff. But I think I can outsource or like highly scale that, outsource it to software, not to people. And then hopefully I can get back to my writing in the morning, deep work in the day. And then I stopped working at 6 right now. It used to be 4:30. And then I just like, do nothing, read, chill out, cook. I cook every meal. And that's about, pretty simple, boring life. Like probably most people's, pretty simple emails, whatever. No longer the 4-hour work week though. There was a good period where my goal was to get done with work before I got out of bed. That was an interesting time. I would just paint. All day. And it was great. Not that literally a year ago, I was just a full-time painter, if you could believe that. It's weird. Weird how life has a weird, this is why I don't have expectations. Someone asked about expectations. I don't have any expectations because they're useless at this point. So I just live my life.
Where can we see your paintings?
If you go to @SHL Paints on Instagram or Twitter, this year's been terrible for painting, but you'll see a bunch of my paintings from last year.
Cool.
Yeah.
Andy's our Lego artist in the group, so.
Yeah.
These are awesome.
SHL Paints.
Nice.
Nice.
Cool. So yeah, I would ask for time for any other plugs, but I think we all follow you on Twitter for sure. And for those that don't, I'll link here in the description here to the recording. But yeah, thanks again for taking the time to join us, Sahil. This is definitely an amazing chat. I really appreciate it. So
You're welcome. And yeah, you're welcome to give them my email and everything else. So my DMs are open on Twitter. Happy to talk to anyone about anything.
awesome. All right. Thanks everyone for joining.